Hello and welcome to this video tutorial that will explain what a whiteboard screencast is and how to create one on the iPad using an application called Explain Everything. In part 1, this current video, I describe what a screencast is, what a whiteboard screencast is, and why you might want to create one for an instructional purpose. We'll look briefly at two examples of screencasts that are posted online. Then I'll outline some best practices that you can use to create effective screencasts. In part 2, we'll talk specifically about using your iPad to create these kinds of videos and what you'll need in order to get started. I'll introduce the iPad application called Explain Everything, and I'll walk through the process of creating a short instructional whiteboard screencast with this app. So first of all, what is a screencast? Basically, it is a video recording, usually with audio narration, of what is taking place on the screen of your computer or other device. It is a movie of the changes over time that a user sees on the screen. So a screencast can have as many different kinds of content as can be displayed on a computer. For example, it could be a PowerPoint slide presentation, a demo of a particular software, a tutorial on how to use a certain feature of an application, a tour of one or more web pages, the sequence of play in a game, or anything else that can be represented on the screen. One particular kind of screencast is called a whiteboard screencast. In this scenario, a tablet device, like the iPad, can be used with a stylus to add annotations or drawings or markups to what is happening on the screen, in the same way that one could do with a regular classroom whiteboard. So, in other words, it's an additional layer of activity that is appearing on your screen and being recorded. As teachers, you can probably see that screencast videos could have many potential uses in instructional settings. You can supplement classroom teaching by offering additional illustrations of ideas, examples of content, concept explanations, and problem solutions. These videos can be watched by students whenever and wherever and as many times as they wish. If there's a difficult concept you are trying to explain or a worked out solution to an exam problem, the student can start and stop and rewind the video as often as necessary to try to understand the material. And obviously these videos can be especially helpful to online and distance students whom you don't see in a classroom or office. So let's look at a couple of examples of whiteboard screencasts. You may be familiar with a website known as the Khan Academy. Sal Khan has become well known for creating short whiteboard-style screencasts, although as you'll see, he actually uses a black background and writes on it with neon-colored pens. Originally focused on math, he has branched out into many other subjects and has now produced over 3,500 videos. His efforts have won the support of major donors, such as the Gates Foundation. And he has built up an entire learning environment around these videos here on his website, which some teachers use to supplement their classes. You can take time on your own to explore the website and its contents, but for now, I would like to show you a short clip from one of his videos, just to give you a feel for his approach. Let's watch the first couple of minutes of his overview of the history of the Vietnam War.
In order to have a respectable understanding of the Vietnam War, we have to rewind all the way back to the late 1800s when France was colonizing Southeast Asia. And in particular, it colonized what is now Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. And they were collectively called French Indochina. You can see Cambodia here, Vietnam along the coast, and then Laos right over here. And France stayed the colonizing power. I have a little gap in my timeline here. And they stayed a colonizing power all the way through World War II. And so you can imagine during World War II, France was quickly overrun by the Germans. The Vietnamese wanted their independence, and so you have a liberation movement that rises up, and it was led by the Viet Minh. And the Viet Minh were led by Ho Chi Minh. This right here is a picture. This right here is a picture of Ho Chi Minh. And besides being a liberation movement, they were also communist. They were also communists, which you could imagine later on during the Cold War will kind of bias the United States against them. But you fast forward through World War II. Eventually, the Japanese take control over Indochina, over Vietnam. But by the time 45 rolls about, or at least the end of 45, and we know that the United States defeats Japan, now all of a sudden the Viet Minh are able to declare a somewhat temporary independence. And it's temporary because shortly after that, and the region is occupied temporarily by the Chinese in the north and the British in the south, who were part of the Allied forces against the Axis. But eventually you have the French coming back, and they want to reassert their control over their former colony. And you have this war that develops, the First Indochina War, between the French and the people sympathetic to the French, the Vietnamese who are loyal to the French, and the North. And the French, and just to make it clear how it sets up, when at the end of World War II, when you had the temporary occupiers, the British and the Chinese obviously had more influence in the North, the British had more influence in the South.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the practices Khan uses in this video. He has pre-positioned some instructional assets that he wants to use to explain his topic, such as maps, images, and a handwritten outline of dates and events, to appear on the screen at the very beginning of the video. There are advantages to this, in that it saves time and gets all the materials in place before the recording begins. But the disadvantage is that the viewer's attention is scattered among many different elements, and so the viewer may not focus properly on the audio narration. Another problem here is that you can't see the entire screen at one time, so that at any given time either the left side with the maps or the right side with the photos gets cut off, and he has to scroll back and forth to display the full screen. This is probably due to a mistake in the screen resolution at which he produced the video, which could be readily fixed. You might ask yourself what else works and doesn't work for you in this kind of presentation. For example, would it be better if the timeline were typed out rather than handwritten? Even though Khan has received a great deal of attention and support for his screencast projects, you might think that you could do a better job on something like this. Let's look at another example. This one comes from a mathematics professor named Robert Talbert, who writes the Casting Out Nines blog for the Chronicle of Higher Education, about using technology as a mathematics educator. Dr. Talbert has recently written a series of helpful articles about creating screencast videos, including this posting specifically about whiteboard screencasts. As you can see, he mentions that the videos of the Khan Academy are the most well-known examples of whiteboard screencasts. Dr. Talbert's screencasts are uploaded to a YouTube channel. Let's watch a clip here from a video that demonstrates something called the optimization problem. Again, we'll just watch a couple of minutes or so from the beginning of the video.
Hello and welcome to this screencast where we're going to work a particular optimization problem. So Bob is hiking from a trailhead to a campsite. The campsite is 20 miles east and 5 miles north of the trailhead, as you see here in the diagram. And whichever way Bob goes, he has to cut through a dense forest to get there. And he can travel fairly fast on the edge of the forest, where it's in the clear at 3 miles an hour. But anytime he's in the forest, he can only travel 2 miles an hour. So where should Bob turn, if he should turn at all, to finish the hike in the fastest possible time? One thing to mention before we get into the solution of this problem is that in the diagram the forest continues off to the left and to the right forever, and so the little piece on the edge there that's marked 5 miles is actually going through the forest itself. So let's see how we might work this problem. So to start this problem, let's play with it and try a few potential routes out, and maybe through playing with this problem we'll have a better idea of what we're being asked to do. So one potential route here is simply just going a straight line from the trailhead to the campsite. That would certainly be the shortest distance, but what about the time? I mean, it's the shortest distance, but he's traveling through this dense forest the whole time and can't move as fast. So how would I find how long time-wise that is? Well, just as a note over here, we know from basic math that distance equals rate times time, and so if I wanted to find the time that something takes, a route takes, I'd have to take its distance and divide by the rate. And I have two different rates in this problem, one for when it's traveling through the forest, that's 2 miles an hour, and another when he's traveling in the clear or along the edge, that's 3 miles an hour. So in this case, how long time-wise does this route take? Well, the distance here is going to be the square root of 20 squared plus 5 squared, because I have a right triangle that's formed right here, this large triangle down below, and the route there is the hypotenuse of that. So that comes out to be about 20.62 miles in all. That's the distance, and now the time that it takes is 20.62, the distance divided by the rate, which in this case is 2 miles an hour. So that's 10.31 hours total for that particular hike. Now there's another potential route that could be taken here.
You can watch more of this video and Dr. Talbert's other screencast on your own time, and read his articles on screencasting. So you can see that again, there is some material that is pre-positioned as the video begins, namely a diagram and the problem description, and then he writes out and narrates the solution as the video unfolds. Math does happen to be one of those subjects that lends itself especially well to these kinds of videos. It's relatively easy to address specific problems and to work out solutions, and you can readily display things like formulas, symbols, graphs, and diagrams. But I think that there are opportunities to use screencasts with almost any subject matter, and so that is why I chose a history video to show you from the Khan Academy, along with this math video from Dr. Talbert, in order to demonstrate that whiteboard screencasts can be used in a variety of subjects. Now that we've seen a couple of brief examples, let's identify some best practices for producing effective whiteboard screencasts. First, have a very specific and clearly defined scope of what you want to communicate. One key idea or at most 2 or 3 closely related concepts are best. If you have more than that, break things up into multiple screencasts of shorter length. In terms of length, the sweet spot seems to be in the 3 to 10 minute range. Although some of their videos are longer, both Sal Khan and Robert Talbert try to stay within the 10-minute time frame. That seems to be about the length of time that audience attention can be maintained before starting to diminish. Third, writing out a script or at least a detailed outline of your audio narration is highly recommended. In general, while you don't want your speech to sound overly formal, you'll be more comfortable and natural in speaking if you've written out what you're going to say ahead of time. This allows you to be relaxed, avoid verbal pauses and stumbles, and getting stuck. Use natural and concise language, and pay attention to pace, emphasis, and inflection. In addition, you need to match what you're saying with what's happening on the screen. A good idea is to create a table that contains your script in one column and a description of the screen action in a corresponding column. For example, here's the script that I prepared for this video that you're watching right now. You see there are 3 columns, one for the scene, one for the audio narration, and one for the action on the screen. Fourth, in terms of best practices, prepare your materials ahead of time. Any files or applications that you're going to use or web pages that you will access should be readily available for you to bring into the recording area. Images, charts, tables, diagrams, maps, timelines, text blocks, outlines, and so forth should be already on the screen or in a folder ready to be opened. Web pages should be opened in tabs in your browser. Fifth, before recording, prepare the space you are working in. Eliminate anything that would produce unwanted noise. Silence your phones and put a Do Not Disturb sign on your door. Have any other materials that you will need, such as your script to read from, ready at hand before beginning to record. Sixth, you'll obviously need to be familiar with the technology that you will use to record the video. While there are any number of possible arrangements of hardware and software, for our purposes we are going to be highlighting the iPad tablet and the application called Explain Everything. And that is the subject of the second video of this presentation, which I invite you to watch now.